Cool. All right, cool. We're there. Yay. Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, guys, so it's study group time. So this is our study group hour. I'm going to read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and then we're going to discuss the material and discuss of that nature. So for those of you who are tuning in and who want readings, unfortunately you missed that opportunity in the last hour. That was in the last hour. This is a new hour, so this is only study group. So any personal questions or questions of a personal nature, I'm not going to even going to pass those up. So everything has to be based on the content. So we're doing a new earth. So it has to either be topical, pertaining to the information in the book, or spiritual based questions regarding the material, or anything similar to that. Okay. For those of you who want readings, you'll have to come back on Friday, because I do my next free hour live is on Friday, same time as last one. Okay. So I'm going to get started here. And so the last time we left off, we were on page 34, and it was a content and structure of the ego. So I'm going to read, and I'm going to stop, make a commentary, and then you can ask your question regarding to that in the comment section below. Okay. All right. So let's go in here, make sure everything's going live over here. Make sure this is all. Yeah, that's live. Okay, making sure. I was like, what is going on here? All right. So content and structure of the ego. The egoic mind is completely conditioned by the past. Its conditioning is twofold. It consists of content and structure. In the case of a child who cries in deep suffering because his toy has been taken away, the toy represents content. It is interchangeable with any other content, any other toy or object. The content you identify with is conditioned by your environment, your upbringing, and surrounding culture. Whether the child is poor or rich, whether the toy is a piece of wood shaped like an animal or a sophisticated electronic gadget, makes no difference as far as the suffering caused by its loss is concerned. The reason why such acute suffering occurs is concealed in the word my, and it is structural. The unconscious compulsion to enhance one's identity through association and an object is built into the very structure of the egoic mind. One of the most basic mind structures through which the ego comes into existence is identification. The word identification is derived from the Latin word idem, meaning same, and facere, which means to make. So when I identify with something, I make it the same. The same as what? The same as I. I endow it with a sense of self, and so it becomes part of my identity. One of the most basic levels of identification is with things. My toy later becomes my car, my house, my clothes, and so on. I try to find myself in things, but never quite make it, and end up losing myself in them. That is the fate of the ego. So I'll stop there for a second, because that's an important thing to consider. And I actually just posted something yesterday about this, meaning that if you go through life and you go through life believing that your sense of happiness and being fulfilled is going to completely come from either money or a perfect marriage, or the idea of a perfect marriage, or the idea of a perfect family, or having children, or the idea of a perfect career, or fame, fortune, all of that stuff. If you think that happiness will come from those things, you will be sadly mistaken in this lifetime, because there are many people who have achieved those things, have those things, and they're still not happy. I know people who have all of those things and they're not happy. They're not happy. I know people who are millionaires and they are not happy. And so money doesn't bring happiness. A perfect job isn't going to bring complete fulfillment or happiness. A perfect family, perfect relationship, which there's no such a thing, is not going to bring happiness. You have people who if I just have a child, I will be happy, but then they struggle because their child may have special needs or may go through unique experiences which require more attention than what they would have expected. And so in that, there's opportunities there, but the person in that moment is not going to feel that sense of completion, because you cannot feel that sense of completion from the things outside of yourself. Completion, a sense of happiness, comes from within. Happiness is a state of being, not a byproduct of circumstances or condition. Big big thing to remember. And so whatever you are seeking in life, whatever you desire in life, if you believe that in the having of it, in the having of a thing, whatever that may be, it is going to allow you to experience this sense of like life fulfillment and everything will be perfect and that will be forever, then that's not going to happen. Even if you achieve everything you wanted and you have a perfect year in your life, that doesn't mean that that's going to stay that way, because life is transient. Life changes. Life moves and morphs and evolves. And so things don't stay the same. You can't hold on to any of that for too long. So the best approach in having more of a sense of happiness or experiencing happiness is by simply finding the happiness in your life as often as possible through just your state of being. So for example, back when I was in my last relationship, I had a apartment full of furniture. It was a nice apartment, nice furniture. I had all I wanted. I was doing fine at work at Starbucks, but I wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy because my relationship was struggling. I wasn't happy because Starbucks was a bunch of work. It was a lot of hard-ass work. And not only that, but even with those things and having those things at that time, once my relationship fell apart, I let go of all of the things that I had in that apartment. All of the stuff that I owned, I just let go of because there was no happiness in it for me. And it was befitting of that lifestyle and of that apartment. It wasn't befitting of just me running around with a bunch of crap that I just didn't really care for, because that's something that I had chosen or picked out with my ex. And so when I left that apartment, I left and I didn't have anything. And I moved in with my mom. And at the time, my mother did not... she lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, but she didn't really have much of nothing. So she had like a bedroom furniture set, maybe a dining room table. That was it. She had no living room furniture. There was nothing in the living room. And so I ended up moving in with her, and I was literally just sleeping on the floor in the corner of the living room with a bunch of bedding and a pillow and my computer and some books. That's pretty much all I had. And I have to say that I was just as content with that as I was in that apartment having those things. I was just as content because I kept myself preoccupied. I focused on things. I focused on other things. I wasn't focused on the maintenance or the sustenance of that apartment. So I found a way to be happy, and I found a way to find some sort of peace in that. It's not ideal. It was not a perfect situation. It's not something that most people are like, I sleep on the living room floor of my mother's apartment. But that's what the reality of the situation was. And in some countries, in some places, that in itself is a luxury. Having air conditioning is a luxury. Having carpet on the floor is a luxury. Having food on the table and not having to sacrifice every day for food is a luxury. So in many instances, I was still very blessed. But from a accomplishment perspective, from our, from the perspective of how we are especially in this country, unless you have all these things, you're a failure and your life is meaningless. And that's just garbage. So we apply a lot of meaning and value to things, but things are not going to add to our level of happiness. Granted, experiencing the having of things, going through the experience of driving a certain car every day, that might be enjoyable for you and that may add to your level of happiness, but it is not the cause of your happiness. For myself, being here in New Mexico, it definitely makes it easier to be happy here. It makes it easier for me to experience the things that make me happy. But if something happens and I'm not here anymore, I will find a different way to be happy. It's not stuck here in this space and in this territory, in this place. It's not stuck here. I can take that wherever I go. And I will take it wherever I go because happiness is within me. It's not attached to things or to a place or to people. I always wonder why people, they fall in love with someone within a month or two, and then that doesn't work out, and they remain in love with the idea of that person, which they probably didn't even truly know, because you don't really get to know somebody until 3 months into the relationship, when all of the falsehoods of a personality tend to fall away, and then they start to get real with people. But the people fall in love with that person in the first few months, and then they think that's who they are, and then they spend years like obsessed with that person and saying, I have a connection with that person. I had a connection. No, you didn't. Like, you fell in love with the idea of a person. You did not have a connection with that person. You just think you did because you fell in love with the idea of what could be, and you're pursuing the idea of what if, even if the person doesn't want to be with you anymore. So that doesn't match up. So the idea of, I'm only happy when I'm with this person, or that person makes me happy. Make it easier to experience happiness, but happiness is not attached to a person, to a thing, or to a lifestyle. Those things can make it easier. It's not based in those things, okay? All right, so going back to what I was saying. Identification with things. The people in the advertising industry know very well that in order to sell things that people don't really need, they must convince them that those things will add something to how they see themselves or as seen by others. In other words, add something to their sense of self. They do this, for example, by telling you that you will stand out from the crowd by using this product, or so by implication be more fully yourself. Or they may create an association in your mind between the product and a famous person, or youthful, attractive, or happy-looking person. Even pictures of old or deceased celebrities in their prime work well for that purpose. The unspoken assumption is that by buying this product, through some magical act of appropriation, you become like them, or rather the surface image of them. And so, in many cases, you are not buying a product, but an identity enhancer. Designer labels are primarily collective identities that you buy into. They are expensive and therefore exclusive. If everybody could buy them, they would lose their psychological value, and all you would be left with would be their material value, which likely amounts to a fraction of what you paid. What kind of things you identify with will vary from person to person according to age, gender, income, social class, fashion, the surrounding culture, and so on. What you identify with is all to do with content, whereas the unconscious compulsion to identify is structural. It is one of the most basic ways in which the egoic mind operates. Paradoxically, what keeps the so-called consumer society going is the fact that trying to find yourself through things doesn't work. The ego satisfaction is short-lived, and so you keep looking for more. Keep buying, keep consuming. Of course, in this physical dimension that our surface selves inhabit, things are a necessary and inescapable part of our lives. We need housing, clothes, furniture, tools, transportation. There may also be things in our lives that we value because of their beauty or inherent quality. We need to honor the world of things, not despise it. Each thing has beingness, is a temporary form that has its own origin within the formless one, life, the source of all things, all bodies, all forms. In most ancient cultures, people believed that everything, even so-called inanimate objects, had an indwelling spirit, and in this respect, they were closer to the truth than we are today. When you live in a world deadened by mental abstraction, you don't sense the aliveness of the universe anymore. Most people don't inhabit a living reality, but a conceptualized one. But we cannot really honor things if we use them as a means to self-enhancement. That is to say, if we try to find ourselves through them. This is exactly what the ego does. Ego identification with things creates attachment to things, obsession with things, which in turn creates our consumer society and economic structures where the only measure of progress is always more. The unchecked striving for more, for endless growth. It is a dysfunction and a disease. It is the same dysfunction the cancerous cells manifest, whose only goal is to multiply itself, unaware that it is bringing about its own destruction by destroying the organism of which it is a part. Some economists are so attached to the notion of growth that they can't let go of that word, so they refer to recession as a time of negative growth. A large part of many people's lives is consumed by an obsessive preoccupation with things. This is why one of the ills of our times is object proliferation. When you can no longer feel the life that you are likely to try to fill up your life with things. As a spiritual practice, I suggest that you investigate your relationship with the world of things through self-observation. And in particular, things that are designated with the word my. You need to be alert and honest to find out, for example, whether your sense of self-worth is bound up with things you possess. Do certain things induce a subtle feeling of importance or superiority? Does the lack of them make you feel inferior to others who have more than you? Do you casually mention things you own or show them off to increase your sense of worth in someone else's eyes and through them in your own? Do you feel resentful or angry and somehow diminished in your sense of self when someone else has more than you when you lose a prized possession? The lost ring. When I was seeing people as a counselor and spiritual teacher, I would visit a woman twice a week whose body was riddled with cancer. She was a school teacher in her mid-40s and had been given no more than a few months to live. Sometimes a few words were spoken during those visits, but mostly... What is going on here? What's going on? Just a second. I was like, something's going on here. I was like, what's going on? Something just popped up on my screen. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Okay, going back to this. Sometimes a few words were spoken during those visits, but mostly we would sit together in silence. And as we did, she had her first glimpses of the stillness within herself that she never knew existed during her busy life as a school teacher. One day, however, I arrived to find her in a state of great distress and anger. What happened? I asked. Her diamond ring of great monetary as well as sentimental value had disappeared, and she said she was sure it had been stolen by the woman who came to look after her for a few hours every day. She said she didn't understand how anybody could be so callous and heartless to do this to her. She asked me whether she could confront the woman or whether it would be better to call the police immediately. I said I couldn't tell her what to do, but asked her to find out how important a ring or anything else was at this point in her life. You don't understand, she says. This was my grandmother's ring. I used to wear it every day until I got ill and my hands became too swollen. It's more than just a ring to me. How can I not be upset? The quickness of her response and the anger and defensiveness in her voice were indications that she had not yet become present enough to look within and to disentangle her reaction from the event and observe them both. Her anger and defensiveness were signs that the ego was still speaking through her. I said, I am going to ask you a few questions, but instead of answering them now, see if you can find the answers within you. I will pause briefly after each question. When an answer comes, it may not necessarily come in the form of words, she said. She said she was ready to listen. I asked, do you realize that you will have to let go of the ring at some point, perhaps quite soon? How much more time do you need before you will be ready to let go of it? Will you become less when you let go of it? Has who you are become diminished by the loss? There were a few minutes of silence after the last question. When she started to speak again, there was a smile on her face and she seemed at peace. The last question made me realize something important. First, I went to my mind for an answer and my mind said, yes, of course you have been diminished. Then I asked myself the question again. Has who I am become diminished? This time I tried to feel rather than think the answer, and suddenly I could feel my I amness. I have never felt that before. If I can feel the I am so strongly, then who I am hasn't been diminished at all. I can still feel it now, something peaceful but very alive. That is the joy of being, I said. You can only feel it when you get out of your head. Being must be felt. It can't be thought. The ego doesn't know about it because thought is what it consists of. The reason was really in your head as a thought that you confused with the sense of I am. You thought I am, or a part of it was in the ring. When whatever the ego seeks and gets, did the woman return the ring, or had it been there all the time? Nobody will ever know. One thing we do know, Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the experience you are having at this moment. It is wrong then to be proud of one's possessions or to feel resentful toward people who have more than you. Not at all. That sense of pride... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me reread that because that's a question. Is it wrong then to be proud of one's possessions or to feel resentful toward people who have more than you? Now let's try going live again. All right. Hey guys, I'm back. For those of you on YouTube and Facebook, my fault. Not my fault, but sorry about that. Yeah, for some reason I was like reading and everything was going well, and then all of a sudden there was like a circle and it was like frozen. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? So I had to restart the whole program because there were some weird issues going on there. But I'm back. Okay, so I'm back. So let me go back to the beginning of that little spot because I want to make sure y'all catch that. Okay. So the illusion of ownership. To own something, what does it really mean? What does it mean to make something mine? If you stand on a street in New York, point to a huge skyscraper and say, that building is mine, I own it, you are either very wealthy or you are delusional or a liar. In any case, you are telling a story in which the thought form I and the thought form building merge into one. That's how the mental concept of ownership works. If everybody agrees with your story, there will be a signed piece of paper to certify their agreement with it. You are wealthy. If nobody agrees with the story, they will send you to a psychiatrist. You are delusional or a compulsive liar. It is important to recognize here that the story and the thought forms that make up the story, whether people agree with it or not, have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. Even if people agree with it, it is ultimately a fiction. Many people don't realize until they are on their deathbed and everything external falls away that no thing ever had anything to do with who they are. In the proximity of death, the whole concept of ownership stands revealed as ultimately meaningless. In the last moments of their life, they then also realize that while they were looking throughout their lives for a more complete sense of self, what they were really looking for, their being, had actually always been there, but had been largely obscured by their identification with things, which ultimately means identification with their mind. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. What does poor in spirit mean? No inner baggage, no identifications, not with things, nor with any mental concepts that have a sense of self in them. And what is the kingdom of heaven? The simple but profound joy of being that is there when you let go of identification and so become poor in spirit. This is why renouncing all possessions has been an ancient spiritual practice in both East and West. Renunciation of possessions, however, will not automatically free you of the ego. It will attempt to ensure its survival by finding something else to identify with. For example, a mental image of yourself as someone who has transcended all interest in material possessions and is therefore superior is more spiritual than others. There are people who have renounced all possessions but have a bigger ego than some millionaires. If you take away one kind of identification, the ego will quickly find another. It ultimately doesn't mind what it identifies with as long as it has an identity. Anti-consumerism or anti-private ownership would be another thought form, another mental position that can replace identification with possessions. Through it, you could make yourself right and others wrong. As we shall see, making yourself right and others wrong is one of the principal egoic mind patterns, one of the main forms of unconsciousness. In other words, the content of the ego may change. The mind structure that keeps it alive does not. One of the unconscious assumptions is that by identifying with an object through the fiction of ownership, the apparent solidity and permanency of that material object will endow your sense of self with greater solidity and permanency. This applies particularly to buildings and even more so to land, since it is the only thing you think you can own that cannot be destroyed. The absurdity of owning something becomes even more apparent in the case of land. In the days of the white settlement, the natives of North America found ownership of land an incomprehensible concept, and so they lost it when the Europeans made them sign pieces of paper that were equally incomprehensible to them. They felt they belonged to the land, but the land did not belong to them. The ego tends to equate having with being. I have, therefore I am. And the more I have, the more I am. The ego lives through comparison. How you are seen by others turns into how you see yourself. If everyone lived in a mansion or everyone was wealthy, your mansion or your wealth would no longer serve to enhance your sense of self. You could then move to a simple cabin, give up your wealth, and regain an identity by seeing yourself and being seen as more spiritual than others. How you are seen by others becomes the mirror that tells you what you are like and who you are. The ego's sense of self-worth is in most cases bound up with the worth you have in the eyes of others. You need others to give you a sense of self, and you live in a culture that to a large extent equates self-worth with how much and what you have. If you cannot look through this collective delusion, you will be condemned to chasing after things in the vain hope of finding your worth and completion of your sense of self there. How do you let go of attachment to things? Don't even try. It's impossible. Attachment to things drops away by itself when you no longer seek to find yourself in them. In the meantime, just be aware of your attachment to things. Sometimes you may not know that you are attached to something, which is to say, identified until you lose it or there is a threat of loss. If you then become upset, anxious, and so on, it means you are attached. If you are aware that you are identified with the thing, the identification is no longer total. I am the awareness that is aware that there is attachment. That's the beginning of the transformation of consciousness. And I'll stop there because it's a good stopping point. Okay, so let's talk about that. So this is, and I relate to this so much because this is a process that I had to go through myself with my spiritual work. In other words, whenever we have a I am worth this much culture. In other words, we go through life and we're constantly trying to prove what we're worth by what we have, what we experience, what we represent, or who we're with. And so that is the basis of social media. And there was a huge focus on that, especially in the last 2 years. I think this year a lot of change is happening there, but still, this is the idea is look at my life, look how amazing I am, look how blessed I am, look how wonderful things are for me, look what I got to experience, look at my value, I'm valuable. Don't you think I'm valuable? Look, here's an example of how I'm valuable. Here's another example of how I'm valuable. And so that's the social media culture. This is how I'm valuable. And we base our value and worth on either what we show that we have, who we're with, what we experience, or what we have to say. And we're all guilty of this, myself included. But this is also something that isn't necessarily serving us when it comes to spiritual growth and evolution, because we exist despite and separate of all those things. We exist apart from all those things. I exist beyond my physical experience as Fernando, as Ferny. So what I have been in this world, who I have been in this world, how I have operated in this world, what I've experienced in this world, even though I can own that because those have been my experiences, past this life, it doesn't serve me to be attached to that, because in soul form there's a pure consciousness there that doesn't matter, that exists and cannot be destroyed. It cannot be reduced. We choose to reduce ourselves by just coming into this physical form, and we come here to experience certain things and to have unique opportunities of awareness, but we're not attached to this world. This world this world and all in it is not the basis of what we are outside of it. And so we exist within this framework. The life that I live and that which is a part of my life, that is a representation of the persona of the ego that I exist as in this lifetime. But I'm okay with that. I am Ferny. Ferny has had all these experiences. Ferny has a unique perspective of things. That's a tool. I'm going to use that because there are certain things I am afforded through that experience. But I'm not overly attached to the things of Ferniness that I am nothing without it. This is just a tool for me. But it is not an easy thing to work through, and it is not an easy thing to practice having a sense of detachment about, because we all definitely can be very attached to ideas, to perspectives. Even the people who walk around acting like their shit don't stink, they're attached to their shit not stinking, because that is the concept, that is the idea. Like, my shit don't stink and I'm above it, and that's an attachment still. You're still attached to something with that. So that's not, you're not sparing yourself from the ego in that form. You're actually more attached to an ego, because you're basically producing a thing that is indestructible and attaching yourself to that thing and acting as if that's it, that's the end of it, and there's nothing beyond that, and that is your value and worth. And so you're still attaching yourself to something. But the idea of just being is the sense of self beneath all of that. So we don't need to define ourselves by anything. We only define ourselves by things in this form through this experience of life. But when we're in soul form, we don't define ourselves by things. And if anything, we're more focused on understanding and awareness and consciousness. And that's what we base ourselves around. So, but the idea of losing attachment to things, and that's something that I've noticed in the last 2 years of my life, is that I don't feel as attached to my things as I used to be. And so if something breaks or something doesn't work or something's lost, I don't feel so connected to it. I don't feel so connected to it. Granted, there are experiences that I'm attached to. There are people that I'm very attached to. But even then, like, I don't base the value of my happiness or experience with my attachment to those things. Like, I have a best friend. I talk to my best friend maybe once a month, maybe once every few weeks. That's not often. We don't talk to each other as often, but that's my best friend. Like, she's my BFF, and nothing changes that. And we have a relationship where we don't need to be glued to each other or be checking in on each other every few hours to feel the value of that connection. I value her and who she is and who she has been in my life and the experiences I've had because of her. I value all of that. That all has value for me. That all has worth for me. But that doesn't change. That doesn't change when I don't have a connection to her on a regular basis. We can go months without talking to each other, and then we reconnect, and it's like no time has passed. That's the value of our friendship. It's not based on how much am I going to do for you or how much you're going to do for me. It's just how we respect each other, acknowledge each other, and value the relationship we have when we have it, and that's it. But that's just what it's based on. But there was no attachment there. I remember with my sister, my middle sister, Rini, she would struggle with that, because she doesn't have to check on me every day. She doesn't have to talk to me every day. I still love her. That doesn't change anything about the love that I have for her. My love for her does not change. But she has this perception that unless you're like talking to each other like besties, or you're checking on each other every single day or whatever, then I don't love her. And that was a tough thing for her to grasp. And so it's taken her some time. And I even have to tell her, look, girl, I love you. I don't got to be talking to you every freaking day to love you. I love you no matter what. Nothing changes that. If you want to talk or you want my advice, message me, whatever. But we don't need to like have this like buddy close like relationship, or the idea of how relationships should be to feel that love and connection for each other. We don't need to have that. We just let it flow the way it's naturally going to flow, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And so a lot of people go through life and they base all of their hard work, all of their energy, they invest so much into the perception of value and the perception of success. I won't be anyone accomplished until I get my degree. I won't be anyone accomplished until I have this kind of relationship or marriage. I won't be anyone accomplished until I have this level of wealth and prosperity. And so you spend your entire life chasing some of those things. Most people will never achieve those things fully. Most of y'all will not achieve those things fully. And that's a hard thing for people to grasp, because they're like, you're taking my hope away. I'm like, no, there's not. Live your life. Like, just live your life and make the most out of your life. You're either going to experience those things that you work towards, or you're not. And if you're not, you should still have a good life despite that. You shouldn't be waiting to have a full life, or to love life, or to have the experience of joy and love until those things are achieved. You shouldn't be waiting around for that, because a lot of people do that their entire life, and once they achieve it, they're like lost because they don't know who they are after that. And I get it, because I went through that same experience myself. So All right, so let me bounce around through here because I want to see what you guys are asking about this stuff. So, yeah, Cassie's like, finding one small thing to feel gratitude about helps bring back happiness for me during the hardest times. Yeah, I would agree with that because I think that and honestly, when I think back to all of the things that I've gone through in my life, it's always the little moments that I value the most, the little moments that have brought me the most joy. Like waking up in the morning, walking over and seeing my partner just waking up and smiling and seeing his smile, that's meant something to me. It's like, I love that. Waking up, and I do the same thing with Mama Cat. I wake up, I come out of the bedroom and I walk into the living room and she's asleep on my robe because I have two robes, one that I wear so that it gets my smell, and then Mama Cat can use it for a few weeks and then I have to wash it, and then I cycle that out with my other robe, which is essentially the same thing as well. So I have two robes and I cycle them out so she always has a robe that smells like me. But like walking in the morning, seeing her in the living room and she opens her eyes, she's looking at me and her eyes are like, she's still sleepy but she's looking at me, and she knows that like it's wake up time, and she's like, and she waits for me to come to her and to give her some kisses, and I give her all these kisses or whatever, and then I feed the other two girls and she knows she's gonna get fed, so she doesn't even get up off of the thing. She waits for me to bring her food, and then she gets up and she's all stretchy or whatever. But that's Mama Cat. But those little moments, those little things are what I see which bring me joy. And so that holds value for me. The experience is what holds value for me, because for me it's that moment that's so precious. And so like, you know, like how often do you get those little moments where you're just like so happy to experience that? And so for me it's more of that. This is why I tell people, like, don't buy me stuff anymore. People always want to give me things or buy me things, and that's great. I appreciate that kind of love, but I always tell people, either give me an experience or give me food. Because if you give me an experience, the experience will stay with me forever. Things, you know, get destroyed. Things disappear. Things don't stick with us forever. But give me an experience or give me food, because I will enjoy food. I will enjoy experience. Things I don't really care as, I don't hold as much value for. Granted, I have my comforts. I definitely have my comforts, and I've, you know, busted my butt to try to give myself the level of comfort that I have today. And I'm definitely attached to the comfort, not to the things. I can still have comfort without things, but you know, these are just reminiscent or reminders of things. I love my books. I love the idea of having books, because for me it's not the actual physical book, it's the idea, it's the information, it's the knowledge and the wisdom that it gives me, or that it allows me to have. It's more of that I'm more connected to, not the physical book. I just like books. So but yeah, it's important to, like, the little things, just the little moments and the little things that you should find joy in, because if you build a life full of little moments of joy that you can consistently allow yourself, afford yourself, then the bigger things that you think are more valuable are not going to really hold as much value. There are things that I used to care a lot more about, like my truck. Right now, my front truck, the front glass of my truck, I love my truck. It's paid off. I ain't buying a new damn truck. I don't care how old the damn truck is. And actually here in New Mexico, there's like this thing. It's like a cultural thing where people hold on to their vehicles forever. So you have like old model vehicles from like the 70s and the 80s, and they're still running and they still take care of their vehicles because they take care of stuff. But like the idea of that. And so I'm like, my truck's paid off. I ain't buying a new vehicle. That's it. Like, I'm done. I don't need a new vehicle. I don't care how, you know, how much money I make or what I have the opportunity to do. I don't need a new vehicle. My truck works just fine. So unless it's destroyed, I don't need to buy a new truck. But I love my truck. I enjoy it. Yeah, it doesn't have all of the screen. You know, it's 2012, and so this is when screens and all that were still becoming more popular. But it doesn't have certain things that the newer vehicles have, and that's fine. I'm fine with it. I'm not gonna, you know, go crazy if it doesn't have certain things. I actually kind of like it in the way it is, because it feels like an older vehicle, and it has that like old feeling to it. So I kind of feel, even though it doesn't look old at all, you would never know that it's an old vehicle. But anyways, the idea of it. So like in my front glass, my front window glass, what is it? Not the rear mirror, but the front windshield. Last year, early last year, when we went to Colorado, because I went to go buy some gummies, and I got a little crack in my glass. This is the first time in like since 2012 that I've ever had any issues and a crack in my glass. But I got a crack in my glass, and I was like, okay. And it started to spread and spread. And now it's spread all the way across, and it's just sitting there, and I'm like, oh. And I'm like, it's not like I don't have the money to go and fix it. I just am lazy, and I've made it a point to go do it. But I still love my truck. I still enjoy driving my truck. That's not going to keep me from enjoying the experience of having that or doing that. So, but it is still an attachment. It's an attachment to a thing. It's just a thing. It doesn't matter what shape it is or what state it is in. If I enjoy the experience, what does it matter what it looks like or how it appears to the person outside? It's like, no, it's ridiculous. We apply way too much value to things that really don't have value at all. No, I wouldn't say so. Moderator Jen, should that be our goal? Being happy with so little? No, not necessarily. We're gonna have to move in the direction of that as a world, just because by default the world is we're tearing this place apart, and we are producing too much waste, and we're not doing anything to recover the planet from what we're doing to it. And so at some point we're gonna have to learn to live with less waste. Which is probably going to produce situations where we're just going to have less options. Like I have friends and people who they're still trying to work towards the idea of being rich and famous and having all this stuff. And I'm like, what kind of world are you living in? Like, we're in a world or planet that cannot sustain that type of lifestyle. And it's not going to be a doable thing in the long run for most people. So there may be some people who get to enjoy that, but it ultimately does not bring you more happiness and more worth. I know people who are, again, millionaires, and they have massive homes. They live like in 2 or 3 rooms of that whole house. They don't really utilize that space, and they don't really get much joy from it other than the what it represents or what it makes people think about. So it's more about like, what is, this is our home, and this is what, so it's like stupid. Like, what's the point? If you enjoy something, by all means enjoy it, but most people who are pursuing this like rich and famous lifestyle is not sustainable, and it's really just producing a lot more waste than is necessary, and it's not going to bring you any more happiness. Like, it's just not. It's for appearances only in most cases. So it's like, no, like, but I wouldn't say we all need to live, like in like one room in our home. I'm not saying we should relinquish everything and give everything away, because I've done that. I've gone through the process. I've done that twice in my life, where I felt that just having less would give me a better sense of happiness. And once I got rid of everything and I gave away all this stuff, then I still had to find a way to experience happiness, and it didn't really matter whether I had stuff or not. And so that really didn't make a difference. So I had to understand happiness in a completely different place, in a different state of mind. Granted, when you have less, you worry less because you're concerned less with the things. If you don't have a home, something that I've enjoyed in being a renter at this time in my life, because I had a house and it was such a worry to have to worry about repairs and all the upkeep and stuff with home. But as a renter, I haven't had to deal with that and worry so much about that. It's been a nice break. It's been much more enjoyable. But I still want to have a home at some point. So at some point I'm going to have a home again, but it's been a nice break. But I'm not saying you should live with less, but you should definitely not obsess over if you have to have nothing in order to be happy. No, you can be happy with or without stuff. But if you are buying stuff and accumulating from the perspective that you need to have these things to be happy, then you're gonna run into some issues there. It's not gonna work for you. You're not gonna find the happiness, and you'll just get into a cycle of accumulating. Let me buy the next video, or let me buy the next game, or let me get the next this or the next that. If I just get the next car, the newest car, I'll be happy. No, you won't, because it's not really gonna make you happy. You might enjoy the experience. The experience is something to enjoy, but it's not gonna like ultimately lead to like your level of happiness on a regular basis. Yeah, it is instant gratification. It's like comfort food. Says, when I grow up, I want to be a minimalist. The love of shopping is real. Oh, for sure. I definitely can be a shopaholic as well. So I've had to like there are days where I'm like, Ferny, what are you doing? Like, you got shit. Like, you don't need to buy no more. So stop it. And so I like have to hold back. I still have my book obsession, but that's the only thing that I tend to be more obsessive about. Yeah, it is hard. There's a film called Minimalist, and it's a really good film because there's the story in the film is about the main character. His mother passes away, and he's stuck with all this crap, and he doesn't know what to do with it. So he gets a storage unit and puts all the stuff there, but he doesn't want it, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he's so attached to his mother because of this stuff. So he has to go through the process of like finding that, and then it's a really good film. I'm still not getting rid of all my crap. Like I enjoy and have my luxuries, and that's okay. I'm allowed to. But that doesn't mean I have to go and like consistently be buying more and more and more and more. Yeah, ego is a human struggle, but it's also a necessary component of a full human experience. You need the ego because all the ego is the ego is a set of ideas that create a structure of personality and of thinking and of focus. And so the ego is like a structure. It's like a framework that allows you to experience through. And if you use it as such, it is a great tool to be used. Most people just want to destroy it or think that it's the root of all evil. But it's not if you really understand the purpose of the ego and why we're here. Yeah, I mean, if you have something that someone you love or someone that you care for that used to have, then enjoy that. I have like right here. You see this? This is right here. This is, remember Sylvia Brown, the great psychic Sylvia Brown? Like this is her ashtray. This is our ashtray. This is her crystal ashtray that she had for many years in her apartment in LA. And it was in LA, in her condo. And so I love it because it's a reminder to me that, and the reason why I love it, I bought it, a couple of years ago, I think. I love it because it helps me to remember that I don't have to be something other than what I am. And in her life, in her career, even though she was a heavy smoker, she always would avoid that, or she tried to make it seem like she wasn't, but she was definitely a smoker. But that was her way of she had to have a front because of society and the way society, even Barack Obama took some heat because he was a smoker. I'm like, you're the freaking president, like you're stressed, like let him smoke, let him have his cigarettes, so I get it, I understand that, but it means something to me. It's something that I really feel a connection to, and so I have it. It's right here on my desk, and I keep things in it. So same thing. So like if you feel a connection to something, then keep it, then have it, but you shouldn't be so concerned with having things that you start to have connection to all these things, because then at that point you start to fill your life with stuff you just don't need to have, and it's only going to take away your energy. I had a friend who, when I went to her apartment, she was very spiritual, and everything was very symbolic in nature, but she had so much crap, and like she would have like 17 things on the wall that all represented several different types of energies and whatever, and I'm just like, having so much just dilutes the significance of it and the symbolism of it. If you're going to have an altar, have 3 or 4 things on the altar. You don't need to like cram it with all this extra garbage that is going to dilute your focus or your power. Like, why would you do that? So don't dilute your energy or the meaning of things with so much. When you have so much, that's a problem. I had a tia, one of my aunts, whenever we went to a party, or we went to like a sweet 16 or a wedding, she would always take the centerpiece of the table. And so she would end up with all these like dusty centerpieces of different events. And they would, after a certain point, they were trashy and tacky, and she would just keep them. And she was just like, but they meant nothing to her because she would end up like, she just liked feeling like she was surrounded by nice things. And so it was more of the feeling that it afforded her, not necessarily the thing that she had. And I would always go over to her house, and I would clean her house and organize, and I would take away some of those things. And she preferred her home without some of those things, because for her it was the idea like, this is a beautiful thing, I want to be surrounded by something beautiful, or I want something beautiful in my life. It wasn't the thing thing she was attached to. It was the idea of having something that represented beauty in her life when her life didn't always feel beautiful, or the life she was living didn't always feel fulfilling for her. Okay. Yeah, Ashley, that's a problem. Ashley Conway says, what if you want to be with someone every day? What if you need that kind of support? Is that a bad thing, or is it bad to be too attached to people? There's no right or wrong, good or bad. It's not about good or bad. It's what do you really need? First of all, we're in physical bodies temporarily. When we're no longer in this body, we will be with all of our loved ones in spirit, because they don't disappear, they don't go away, they just change form. And so it's not like they're gone or forever disappeared. They're just not available to you. So when I think of people who have passed in my life, I think of it as like, okay, they just got their papers to retire, and so they're retiring to an island that has no technology and no phone, and they're going to enjoy themselves and have fun, and all of their needs are taken care of. That's how I choose to think about it. So I'm like, at some point I get to retire with them. I just can't right now. So they're somewhere else, and that's what they have to deal with. Every now and then I may feel their energy or whatever. And that's how I choose to see it and think of it, just because it helps me to feel and remember that they're not gone. They're just in a different state, in a different form. Granted, it's easier for me to do this for other people's loved ones. I hear more from other people's loved ones than from my own people, because my own people have stuff to do. They don't need to be visiting me every second of every day. So I connect more with other people's loved ones in spirit. But feeling attached to people, there's nothing wrong with loving people and wanting to spend time with them. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't control how much of a person you will be able to hold on to, because at some point that person will not be there, or you will not be able to have the person. And if it becomes an obsession, that is a problem, because once you become obsessed with people, at that point the issue is not the relationship, or you don't need that person. You're obsessed with what that is affording you, or with what you believe you're getting from that. So it's more of an obsession that is unhealthy, that will not serve you. There's nothing wrong with desiring to love and to be with others or to spend time with others, but to be obsessed with people is a problem. And that's when you get yourself in trouble, because you will lose yourself in that idea that that person has to be in your life, or you're nothing without them. No, you are something without them. You just have to understand who you are without them, and you haven't done enough to understand that. So that's where you can get into some trouble there. Candy, I'm reading your messages. I meant to say, some of us feel guilt because if we spend on things we want, then when someone in our family needs something, we won't be able to help them as much. Here's the thing. I have a massive family. And in my family, there are people who always take and take and take and do nothing to offer things in return. At the same time, there are always people in my family who need and need and need, but do nothing to give themselves that which they need and sustain the status quo. Personally, even though some people consider me living in the lap of luxury in my family just because I live in the place that I live and I have the things that I have, and I have an iPhone and I have a MacBook and I have an iPad. Like, they think I'm rico, right? I'm rico. And I'm like, no, I'm conscious of what I buy and I use what I have. But if you look at me, and then if you look at my mom lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, very humble, but she's a hoarder. She has a bunch of crap she doesn't need, never uses. She has a bunch of clothes she always buys, never wears. And whenever I've bought her nice things, she gives it away. And so she's giving away, I bought her living room furniture that she's given away just because she, for whatever reason. And so my mom and I are very different, and we deal with things very differently. And so someone may see me and say, oh, well, you're living like a rico, but your mom, she's over there living in the hood. And I'm like, no, that's her life. That's her choice. She chooses to live the life she wants to live. It's like, I've offered plenty of opportunities for her to have what she could, enjoy in a much different state of life. That's her choice. That's how she chooses to live. I'm not going to disrupt that. That's how she is. And so my sister and I, my middle sister and I, we are very different from other people in our family. We live very differently from, and people want to say that we're snooty or we're snotty. No, we're aware of what we purchase, and we just afford ourselves things, and that's okay. People can choose to see us how they want to see us. We're not going around like throwing it in people's faces, and we're not going around telling people that they're not worth anything. They're worth whatever they believe they're worth. That doesn't have anything to do with what they have. I have family members that I love, and they're very humble, and they don't really they live very humble lives, but they enjoy their lives. They're good with that. So it just depends on how you want to look at it, because you can look at it in all different angles, but every person's responsible for the life they choose to live. So I afford myself things that I enjoy. I give myself, I used to pamper myself a lot more than I do now. Now I just I just exist every day. I wake up, and for me, my luxury is coffee that's made in Santa Fe. For me, my luxury is being able to walk on a trail that is beautiful with beautiful views. That's for me is a luxury at this point, because I don't really care about the things, right? So to me, that's a different story. The idea of luxury is different now than how it used to be. But yeah, it just depends on how you want to look at it. But you shouldn't guilt yourself if you want to give yourself or enjoy your life and your hard work. But your family doesn't have those things, so they can enjoy it. You shouldn't do that to yourself. It's not worth energy. And family, by all means, family is great, but people have too much of an attachment to the idea of family. No, I don't think so. I have so many people in the family, and in the past, people would say oh, he's away from the family. He doesn't want to have anything to do with us. I'm like, okay, well, I have no thoughts or feelings about any of that. There's no reason why I'm not involved with y'all. I just am focused on myself and my own life. I don't need to be involved in y'all's life. For that doesn't mean anything. Y'all turning that into something is y'all. I don't care. That's nothing to do with it. I'm living my life. I'm doing my thing. And so I ain't even thinking every day, I'm going to do this so that I don't have to be talking to y'all. No, I don't think that way at all. I just focus on my stuff. You can take it as an offense to yourself. That's you being attached to value and worth. So that's you being attached to the experience of that, and you diminishing yourself because of that. It has nothing to do with it. So no. Never wanted an ashtray, but now I have an ashtray. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm out of time. So I love you all. I will be back on Friday for our next study group time.